Hey guys, so I've been doing quite a bit of shopping recently, and I'm beginning to run out of space for all my clothes. So, I figured it's time I update my wardrobe. Literally, I'm going to throw out my old one, and in this video, demonstrate how I built a brand new wardrobe. I won't be going into detail on the process for this one. Instead, I'd like to share my story, what I've been up to in life, and how things are going on my construction journey. Before that, I just want to give a quick rundown on the general idea and dimensions for the project. This is the front elevation of the wardrobe. The master height is 7 feet 9 inches and a half. The master width is 3 feet. The height of the wardrobe, minus the legs and the crown molding, is 6 feet. The bottom shelf is placed 1 foot 6 inches away from the bottom of the wardrobe, and the top shelf is placed a foot away from the ceiling. The cylinder will be placed 4 feet 6.5 inches on center from the bottom of the wardrobe, and finally, the crown molding will be 3 feet wide by 1 foot and 4 inches high. This is the side elevation. The inside depth will be 2 feet, and combined with the quarter backing, 3/4 pine boards, and 1/2 inch doors, the master depth will be 2 feet 1 inch and a half. Now, on to the video. About a year ago, I completed my 2 years of construction management classes. Since then, I needed to gain experience in the trade, and because I wanted to specialize in building houses, I started looking for framing jobs. Till about 6 months ago, I was able to land a myriad of jobs, but they were short-lived, and I was always met with tyranny, belittlement, humiliation, and in the end, failure. I used to have the tendency to predict God's will for my life. I felt like carpentry was my purpose, and that my previous employment was all His doing, but my succession of failures caused disappointment and led me to question God. I often think about some of the construction workers I've met in the past 3 years, and wonder if they've experienced the same trials I'm facing. Have they experienced a series of failures? Do they question their purpose, identity, doubt their intelligence, strength, fear for their future, or wrestle with their faith in God, all because of carpentry? I decided to seek counsel from the pastor at my local church, in hopes that he can make sense of my situation from a biblical standpoint, and perhaps add some fuel to the almost extinguished fire of my faith. The sermon that day was about God's blessing, and how one must humble himself in prayer to Jesus in order to receive it. That one must admit he's foolish and weak in order to obtain his wisdom and strength. To acknowledge that you are powerless without him. Only then can you receive God's blessing. The lecture tailored perfectly to my circumstances. It was as if the creator of the universe himself was speaking directly to me. Maybe I hadn't received the blessing that I still pray for because I walked around like I was the smartest person in the world, and God allowed my failures in order to humble me. I've always been narcissistic. Despite receiving a lead to my investigation, I still talked to the pastor. I explained my situation in sufficient detail, got a little emotional in the process, and asked the question, why is God doing this to me? He simply told me that God has a plan and prayed for me. We dapped each other up and said goodbye. I felt like I was finally on the brink of a blessing. I mean, that's how religious testimonies go, right? It's usually the darkest before dawn. When one is at the mercy of his struggles, and no other options are left, this person turns to God, then all problems are solved. I decided to plug back into church after not attending for quite some time. I started going every Sunday, joined a weekly meeting with a handful of other church members, otherwise known as a small group, and eventually found another framing job. Could this be what I was hoping for? Overall, it was a good experience. The environment was friendly, the work was good, I was praised for my efforts, and respected by my peers. I tried my best not to jump to conclusions, but eventually succumbed to my longing for a purpose and convinced myself that I was meant to be there, and I finally received that which I had been praying for. Unfortunately, that was not true. For the sake of privacy, I'm going to spare you all the nuances, but much like this portion of the story, my employment came to an abrupt end. At this point, I was almost convinced that there is no God, or I was being used as a toy for his amusement. Regardless, I continued on my quest to find a master who could bestow upon me the true art of framing, and, simply because I wanted to believe there was a benevolent being looking out for me, I still continued going to church. Not that I had any reason. My faith ran dry, and I was running on nothing but desperation and wishful thinking. I was driving around neighborhoods in my area when I stumbled upon a house that was under construction. I parked my vehicle, walked up to the job site, and asked the boss if he was hiring. To make a long story short, he instead told me that his brother was looking for a new worker and passed me his number. I gave him a call, asked if he was hiring, informed him of my capabilities, and he sent me the address. By the time my first day on the job comes around, my new boss, and with the assistance of his previous help, have already managed to complete the majority of the house. The walls are up, braced, and covered with plywood. The joists and cathedral ceilings are in place, and they even put on most of the rafters. First order of business was to construct the gable wall, which is essentially 2x4 studs coming into contact with the rafter. The stud is then given an angle cut that varies depending on the pitch of the roof. Right off the bat, I'm having a hard time because my new boss only speaks Spanish, and I barely know any. About 20 minutes in, I notice that no one else has shown up yet, which inspires me to ask if there were any other workers coming, to which he replies, no. The rest of that week was spent putting on the fascia and soffit, covering the roof with plywood, and the interior work like fire blocking, hurricane ties, putting on nailers, etc. I wasn't sure if I was going to stick around for very long. Because of the language barrier, it was difficult for me to receive instructions, which must have frustrated my boss. Plus, I haven't had much luck with my previous employment, and God hadn't proven himself to be on my side, if he's even real. Why would this time be any different? The present day. As of the present moment, I've been working under the same boss for approximately 6 months now, which admittedly is the longest I've spent at one framing job. We just recently finished up our 6th house and are awaiting the plans for the next one. Within this time frame, I've been heavily involved in every aspect pertaining to a house, and I've learned so much along the way. Being my boss's only protege has its advantages. As for my walk with God, I'm still attending church every Sunday. I attended a program they call Growth Track, which helps one discover their talents and gifts from God, which they could use to benefit the church. I joined the greeter team, which requires me to open doors for attendees and greet them with a smile, as well as hand out note cards. It's a role best suited for an extrovert, so I thought it would be a good way to challenge my social anxieties. I'm slowly seeing results. I don't know how long this current job will last, or if it's God's will that I'm meant to be there. Regardless, I'm happy with what this opportunity has done with my life so far.